So I don't think any of you liberals have ever picked up a Bible and read it, but I think it's time to educate y'all on the biblical stance of woman and the biblical stance of abortion.
All right, let's see it.
I doubt y'all even own a Bible,
Well, that depends. What language would you like?
but if you do, open up 1 Timothy 2 for me and go to verse 11 and read. Women are to learn in silence with complete submission. I do not allow a woman to teach or hold authority over a man. She should keep silent. For Adam was formed first, and Eve afterwards. Furthermore, Adam was not deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and fell into sin. However, woman will be saved through bearing of children.
So, New Catholic Bible, not the greatest translation in the world, but there are some things you should know about trying to appeal to the pastoral epistles. And the main thing is that they were not written by Paul. They were written by someone pretending to be Paul decades after his death. And in this passage alone, there are two big ways that it directly contradicts the genuine Pauline epistles. One way is in this insistence on the complete silence of women. In 1 Corinthians, we actually have Paul advocating for women prophesying and praying in church gatherings. So the notion that they were supposed to be completely silent directly contradicts the genuine Pauline epistles. Additionally, the notion that women are to be saved in childbearing directly contradicts the fact that Paul thought Jesus was going to be coming back too quickly for anybody to worry about having kids. In fact, the rule that he says he lays down in all of his congregations is that everyone stay in the circumstances they were in when God called them, because the time was short. So Paul actually does not care about procreation at all. And the notion that the salvation of women was contingent upon childbearing is entirely alien to the genuine Pauline epistles. So you are appealing to a fraudulent piece of literature that directly contradicts what the actual Paul the Apostle thought about things like procreation and women speaking in church.
And if you don't know what that means, that just means a woman's role, and I'm not saying the only role, but the most important is to have a kid.
Nope. Paul thought everyone should be celibate anyway. And again, he told everybody, stay in the circumstances in which you were when God found you. And so procreation was not a priority at all for Paul. It was just a priority for someone who was lying about being Paul decades after Paul's death.
But instead of having a kid, following your purpose and what you should strive for, isn't that amazing to be a mother? But instead, y'all would rather sleep with 100 guys and the babies. Find God.
So lots of problems with your rhetoric here. To begin, it's not finding God to just mindlessly bray the costly signaling and the credibility-enhancing displays of Christian nationalism and right-wing authoritarianism and social dominance orientation. That's just petty and naive identity politics in search of some kind of validation. But you don't have to carry the water of awful people to find validation as a person. You don't need to do that. There are much better ways to go out there and establish yourself as a person. And advocating for the biblical stance on women and abortion is nonsense, because the Bible is not univocal. And you can only talk about the biblical stance on these things if you presuppose univocality, the notion that the Bible speaks with one single, unified, and consistent voice, and from one single, unified, and consistent perspective. There are no data that support that notion. That's just a dogma that a person chooses to accept, and you have chosen to accept it because you imagine that that is a key to helping you find greater access to power and to resources. Unfortunately, it requires demeaning, dehumanizing, and denying the agency and autonomy of more than half the people on the planet. And you go about it in a remarkably thoughtless way. The Bible says absolutely nothing about abortion. And the notion of this fraudulent claimant to Paul's authority, that women are saved in childbearing, in addition to directly contradicting Paul himself, doesn't take into account the fact that many women who get abortions already have children. So abortion in and of itself is not undermining this claim made by someone who is just lying about being Paul. You don't know anything at all about this issue. You know very little about the Bible, and I would recommend that you get educated. You learn to think more critically, you learn to Google competently, and you grow out of trying to find validation by carrying water for awful, awful men. And the fit for this video, It's my University of Oxford hoodie.